Paul McCartney, John Lennon, Ringo Starr, and George Harrison, the four legendary members of one of the most famous bands in history, the Beatles. So where do we start? Many years ago, back in 1956, 16-year-old John Lennon formed a band with some of his friends from school in Liverpool. The band was called Blackjacks for a short time, but then changed to the Quarrymen after they discovered some other local band had already taken this name. A year later, in 1957, Paul McCartney, a 15-year-old teenager at this time, met Lennon when he went to see Lennon's band play at a local church fete. Shortly after this, he joined the band as a rhythm guitarist, and in 1958, McCartney invited his friend George Harrison to audition for the band. Although Lennon was reluctant to incorporate Harrison at first, the band eventually made him the lead guitarist. By 1959, Lennon's initial band members from high school left the band, and he himself started to study at the Liverpool College of Art. The three left members, Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison, continued performing with different drummers, identifying as Johnny and the Moondogs or the Rainbows. In 1960, Stuart Sutcliffe, Lennon's friend from art school, joined as the band's bass player. It was Sutcliffe's suggestion to change the band's name to Beatles, which was later changed to the Silver Beatles, and then simply the Beatles as we know them today. In the same year, the Beatles' unofficial manager, Alan Williams, arranged a residency for them in Hamburg, and they hired Pete Best as their drummer. In Hamburg, the Beatles performed at various clubs and lost their bass player Sutcliffe, since he decided to leave the band to continue his art studies, so McCartney took over the bass. In 1962, the Beatles signed a 5-year contract with Epstein, giving Epstein 10 to 15% of their income. They also replaced their drummer Pete Best, who played with them between 1960 and 1962 with the famous Ringo Starr, who left his band, Rory Storm and the Hurricanes, to join the Beatles. In addition, in 1962, they recorded their harmonica-laden first single, Love Me Do, which they later re-recorded. In 1963, the Beatles decided that all band members should contribute vocals to their albums, and the Lennon-McCartney songwriting partnership was established. The same year, the Beatles released their first album, Please Please Me. Their new version of Love Me Do got to be #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, and the single Please Please Me reached #1 on almost every UK chart. In 1964, the Beatles released their second album, Meet the Beatles, which made it to the top 1 in the album chart in the US and remained for 11 consecutive weeks. They also appeared in 3 consecutive episodes of The Ed Sullivan Show. In fact, the first episode featuring the Beatles was seen by 73 million viewers, which is over a third of the United States population. In 1965, the Beatles performed at the Rock Shea Stadium in front of an audience of 55,600 energized fans, which was one of their first major stadium concerts. This year also saw the release of the Beatles' 6th studio album, Rubber Soul, which was an absolute success. In 1966, the Beatles' legendary album Revolver came out, accompanied by the songs Eleanor Rigby and Yellow Submarine. This album is considered the reflection of the Beatles' growing interest in the LSD drug and its impact on their music. Revolver was #1 on the Billboard, 200 for 6 weeks and 94 weeks on the chart overall. In 1967, the band's manager Brian Epstein was found dead due to an overdose of a sleeping pill. Although it's unclear if his death was accidental or intentional, many claimed it was a suicide. The Beatles decided to not attend his funeral to give some privacy to Epstein's family, and John Lennon later referred to his death as the moment that led the Beatles on the path to their eventual breakup. In 1968, the Beatles made an iconic move and flew over to India, where they were trained in a meditation training program led by the Maharishi. This year, they also made their first and only double album, The Beatles, which included 30 songs and is mainly known as the White Album. In 1969, the Beatles performed their last live concert, which is also known as the Rooftop Concert, and was performed on the rooftop of Apple Corps headquarters in central London. This year also saw the release of the Beatles' last recorded album, Abbey Road. In 1970, during a Q&A with journalists, McCartney stated that he had no intention of continuing writing music with the Beatles or John Lennon. The same year, McCartney also released his secret solo album, McCartney, which featured 13 songs mostly created with basic home equipment. Let It Be, The 12th and final studio album by the Beatles was released this year and marked their public breakup. And that's it for today, guys. I hope you liked this video and don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. See you next time.